Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 302. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I've got something new for you. I've got a co-hosted episode with the fabulous Cara Wilde. You may know Cara from all the times that I've mentioned her and linked to her on this podcast and in the show notes. She has also been a guest on this show, episode 13, way back in the beginning days, How to Find Bliss in Life and Business. She was also a guest kind of slightly more recently on episode 116, How Channeling Your Guides Can Transform Your Business. She's also been a guest on the episode that I did with the 4 woo experts, and that was, again, slightly more recently. Episode 201, that was actually 101 episodes ago, so not fairly recently. But I'm really excited to have Cara on the show. Again, this is not an interview, it's a co-hosted episode where we're having a conversation about a topic. And this topic is how to find joy in your life through nature. Cara is a very dear friend of mine. She's someone that I've learned a lot about in terms of connecting with nature spirits and connecting with spirit guides and connecting with unseen things in the outdoors. And I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. Let me tell you a little bit about Cara Wilde. If you don't know who I'm talking about, Cara supports professional women who want to make a difference in the world, but are feeling stalled in their authentic work and want to reclaim their soul purpose with confidence. She helps healers, coaches, and therapists at any stage of their professional lives who are looking to deepen their spiritual and professional development. Cara left her counseling and more mainstream work behind her when she couldn't use her psychic abilities or work with guides and began to feel as though she was working blind. She set up her own business as an EFT practitioner, started to use her channeling and intuitive abilities, and felt like she got the team on board and helped her clients in making more significant and longer-lasting changes in their lives. As part of her work, Cara channels a collective called the Ancients and offers practical guidance and support specific to the needs and concerns of those of us who are deeply sensitive and passionate about creating real change in the world. Cara passionately believes that those of us considered misfits are truly here to create a new way in the world and are part of the divine's blueprint for a heaven on earth. Cara lives in Cornwall, surrounded by the ocean and stone circles. She home educates her 2 children, and when life gets too hectic, you can find her running the trails or curled up under a heavy blanket with a good book. So I will link to her website, her Facebook page, and her YouTube channel in the show notes so you can learn more about her. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about rewilding or untaming and why you might want to do this. You may have heard the term rewilding before and thought, sounds kind of interesting. What the heck is that? We talk about that. We also talk about how being in the wild can help you untame yourself. We talk about how nature can help you get to know yourself. We discuss what we've learned from nature about rewilding, how getting lost in the outdoors has taught us certain things, and how it's actually been a useful experience. We discuss how wild nature speaks to us, sometimes quite literally. We discuss what we can learn from building relationships with nature, how to work with stone circles in a different way, what we've learned about resilience and trust from our experiences in nature, what we've done when things went wrong, and what we might do differently next time. We discuss how you can connect with nature to work with spirit. We also discuss how to work with portals to connect with other dimensions and energies, how nature can serve as a pathway to oneness. And finally, we discuss how to reconnect to oneness by building our relationship with nature. I think this was a really, really great episode, a great conversation, and I hope you find it interesting and useful. Cara and I already have a date in the calendar to do another episode. We don't know yet what we're going to talk about. So if there are any topics that you would like the two of us to specifically have a conversation on and share it with you, please let me know. As always, you can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or get in touch online. I would love to know what you think. And in this episode, we also answer a question that one of my readers and listeners had from the book, something that came up that I experienced in my book in the chapter on King of Limbs, where I encountered some kind of energy that scared the crap out of me. And this person asked me to ask Cara what she thought of this. So this is something that we also explore in this episode. So I hope you find this interesting and useful. But before we get into today's episode, I also wanted to mention a podcast that I was recently a guest on. Nancy Mensah has a fantastic podcast called Diary of a Female Entrepreneur. And we discussed how to shift gears in business and how to know specifically when to shift gears in business. So I talk all about pivoting and all the changes I've made over the years and why and how. And we had a really, really great conversation. So you might have heard me tell some of these stories before, perhaps in a different format, but I think the way Nancy kind of guided me through this conversation and this interview was really, really interesting. We had great rapport from the start. I really loved her. If you want to listen to the episode, you can do so by going to the link hollywharton.com/Nancy, and that will redirect you to her website and her podcast feed. A great episode, and I think you will find it useful if you've ever felt like you needed to kind of shift or pivot or switch things up in your business or life. We also talk about life changes in there. So that's a great episode, and I really, really recommend it. Again, before we get into today's episode, I would also love for you to join me on Patreon. If you get value from this podcast, I would love to have you go over to Patreon and support me there to make sure that this podcast can continue production. If you head over to patreon.com/Holly Wharton, that's patreon.com/Holly Wharton, you can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month, and you'll get exclusive access to content that I don't share anywhere else, including a monthly Q&A and done-for-you mindset work. Finally, I wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone on my Facebook, on my online networks, listeners of this podcast, everyone who has supported me by purchasing my book. The book has been a great success so far, and I'm continue to promote the book to keep it out there and up on the Amazon charts and in front of new people's eyes. If you have purchased the book, I am so grateful. Thank you so much. And if you've reviewed the book, the same. If you've read the book but not yet reviewed, I would love to have a very quick review on Amazon if you enjoyed the book. Reviews are so, so important, and they help me to take on certain people to help promote the book who require a certain number of reviews. So my next goal is to get up to 10 reviews on Amazon.com, and then from there I'm going to try to go to 20 reviews, because there are certain people that I can hire to help me promote the book, but they need that number of reviews. So if you haven't reviewed, I would so appreciate it if you could just pop a review on Amazon.com. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. The book, as you may know, I hired a book launch manager, and she helped me get the book up to number 1 in 16 categories on Amazon. I am just so absolutely thrilled and super, super excited about how this book is getting out into the world. So thank you for being a part of that, and thank you for all your help. So that was a rather lengthy introduction, and without further ado, I will now hand you over to today's episode, where we talk about how spending time in nature can help you find joy in your life. Thank you for listening. Hello, hello. Cara Wilde and I are here talking about nature and talking about how to connect with nature to rewild and untame yourself, and what does that mean and why you might want to do that. So I'm super excited about this conversation. This was your idea originally, and I thought it was perfect the second you sent it in. So yeah. So what is this whole concept of rewilding and untaming, and why do you think someone might want to do that?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I guess people might want to do it because I needed to do it and I kind of know what happened to me. So I lived the majority of my life in like a town, big town, small city kind of thing. And my exposure to nature was like tarmacked parks. That's it. I've always had a connection to willow trees, and I found out why later on about that. I might come back to that. But so when I moved to Cornwall, I moved down for the ocean. But this was about 11 years ago. We moved down to Cornwall, and there's Bodmin moors. So for people that don't live in the UK, they're just like completely wild moors. Like, you do not mess with them. I nearly lost a child down a sinkhole. I don't know what they're called, but you have to be really careful. The weather pattern changes and all that kind of thing. And we lived not far from there. And the first day I went, I used to be terrified of bulls. And I went and I used to park the car, leave the doors open in case a bull chased me, and I'd be able to dive into the car and not have to stop and mess about. And then I'd be walking around and just like, where's the signpost? There's no signpost. Nobody is telling me where to go, what's safe to go, where's the tarmac. Oh my God, this is nature. And it was just such a mirror for me about how I'd lived my life according to like internal rules that had been given to me by society or by helpful people that I'd, grown up with, that I'd kind of like outgrown but not known, or not even known that I could just leave, and start to live like, what's the book called? The Path Less Traveled.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like leaving the tarmac and finding your own pathway, and nature and working with wild nature, getting lost in nature has really helped me. That like there's something, I don't know if you have this, but there is something that happens that starts like an untangling process within you when you start working with wild nature. Like the wilder the better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I guess that's what I mean by not following just society tarmac, the path and the roads, and just trying to find your own way through life. That it's been such a gift for me that.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of my last year's process of, connecting with the trees and spending more time out in nature, but more time being still in nature rather than walking through nature. And that was a huge lesson for me last year because I really like walking. And so for the last few years, I've been walking, which is nice. And it's getting me connected to nature, but not as much as it did last year when I was stopping, sitting, being still, and opening up more to connecting with nature in that way. So that it's been a massive shift for me.
What was the difference for you, do you think? Like, what did you notice are the differences between like experiencing going through nature and being really present with nature is what it sounds like?
Being present with nature gave me more of a connection. Whereas when I was just walking, it was like I was seeing, I was hearing, I wasn't connecting as much. It was like I didn't develop as much of a relationship with nature as I did once I slowed down. And I think that connection started the rewilding or untaming process because I spent a lot of time outdoors, but I wasn't really kind of plugged into nature. I was still plugged into my normal world.
Okay, so for me, that speaks to the difference of like just staying in your mind and being in your body.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I guess that's a really good way to describe what I was trying to say, really. It helped me get back into my body. Yeah. Sometimes I didn't want to be in there. It didn't feel very nice, you know? But it does, because I don't know, like, how does it do that? How does it help you be in your body, do you think? I don't know if that's an easy thing to...
That's a really good question. And I think being in my body is something that I've struggled with for years. And I would, do like alternative therapies and things. And people would say, oh, you need to be more in your body. And I'd just be like, what the heck does that mean? Like, I think it's feeling rather than thinking.
Yeah.
More than anything. Yeah. Because I tend to naturally be very much in my head. And so I think that by slowing down and connecting with nature in that way and being still in nature and getting into my body, it made me feel nature rather than thinking about nature, you know, or like thinking, oh, there's a bird, oh, there's a tree. You know, it was more like feeling the rhythms of nature, feeling the breeze, feeling the soil, the leaves, trees, that feeling, not just tactile feeling, but like what was going on inside my body as I was experiencing this. So it's kind of more like an inner feeling, and yeah.
Yeah. So there are key moments in my life when I have really experienced that deeply, and it doesn't happen all the time. But I remember it sounds like a cliche, but I remember being in a really good space and sat on the cliffs watching this bird fly, and it moved so I didn't have to, because I could feel its movement within me.
Yeah.
And then I have had moments of just feeling like I was the bird's wings, you know, that real strong connectedness. I can probably count on my hands how many times that's happened. And then you do get a deep understanding of how interconnected we all are, and how deeply dependent we are on nature, and also how resourceful it is. And then that helps you feel like you can build more faith and trust in something bigger than yourself to take care of you. And the amount of times that I've run to stone circles when I've been having a paddy, like that's a Yorkshire saying, it's like stomping my feet and not very happy with life and wanting it to be different, or just really frightened. And then like laid down on the earth and have heard the earth say, let me take care of you, let me hold you, I am the source of your abundance. My head can't figure out what that means necessarily. I don't know how to action that much in my life, but in that moment it's felt like a real cradling.
And your body knows, your body understands.
Yeah. So tell me sometimes when it's not worked, like when things have not gone right in nature, or when they have like startled you or something.
All right. So we have a question that one of the readers of my book asked me to ask you. So this is perfect timing for this. So in the book, I communicate with a tree called King of Limbs. And it's this tree in this fairly large forest. And I'd walked kind of the farthest point from the car park to get to this tree. It was on the map. I knew where it was. I was getting to it. I was really out in the middle of nowhere. I hadn't seen another person for the last hour or so or more. So I was very much alone in the woods, and finally came across this tree. And as I walked into the clearing and approached the tree, I felt kind of a weird feeling. But then when I got right next to the tree, that feeling disappeared. It was a really ancient oak that had a hollowed out trunk. And so I went and I sat inside its trunk, and there was like this beautiful energy of like, just like an energy bubble of goodness inside this tree. It was so gorgeous. It was so gorgeous. So I sat there for a while. I got his story. And when I was done, I stood up, and the second I stepped out of the inside of his trunk, I felt this really awful feeling. It was like the feeling that I felt when I first stepped into the clearing, but worse. And I just got really scared. And I actually I walked a full circle around the tree to see what I could see. I couldn't see anything. I was so scared. I picked up my phone to find the fastest way out of there. My phone battery went from 40% to 0, like that.
Whoa.
That's never happened to me before. And so I just thought, I'm just going to get out of here. I'm getting chills as I tell you the story. I just like hightailed it back to my last known point, and then found my map and just got out of there. You know, I talk about this in the book, and I say, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know if it was just because I felt a very clear energy. It wasn't necessarily good or bad, but I couldn't see anything, so I didn't know what it was, so I got scared. Or was it a dark energy? I don't know what it was, but it scared the crap out of me, and I got out. And then the thing with the phone battery also scared me, because that's never happened before. So one of the reasons my book said, ask Cara what she thinks. So I'd really love to hear what's your take on that?
So I think, listening to you, what was coming up for me was that might have been like a very human kind of energy too. So there's like, so I have an example that's similar. So I went out for a walk late at night years ago, just where I live locally, and was on the edge of a cliff, and just felt this really horrible feeling that somebody had been pushed off.
Oh.
And I think I know it's not nice, is it? And then there's a story about a pagan friend of mine who was a witch who went through. It was well known that if you went through this particular point on this road journey, if you were sensitive, you would feel something because there'd been quite a traumatic accident. So I think that could be something. Something could have happened there. You were already open. Yeah. You were already deep. Like your senses were already like amplified and tuned. You were already starting to open. So you could have quite easily picked up on something that had happened there, or a thought form. You know, I've had experiences of being in houses where there is a lot of suppressed anger, and so thought forms pop up because that energy's got to go somewhere. And then I have also had experience of like something happening to me in church that felt like it was a non-beneficial energy. But that happened to me because I was kind of saying, come on, if you think you're hard enough, you know, and I won't necessarily do that again. So my take on that is I'm really glad you trusted your instincts. I think that is the most important thing. And what I always teach is if you go to a party, you know, like meeting a guide or an energy is like if you go to a party and you just don't like a particular person, you won't engage with them. It's exactly the same with energies. You're a sovereign being, and calling the divine or source if you want to. Trust your instincts and then ask questions later. So it could have been that if us two were there, we might have felt a bit curious about what that was. And is it a human? I've been involved in helping spirits to pass to the other side. So I think nobody knows for sure. We'll know better when we're on the other side. But I think there's various things that it could be, but you are in charge of your energy system. And I'm glad you got out of there.
Yeah. And it was also like a couple days before Samhain. So theoretically, the veils would have been thin anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think I was just hypersensitive to whatever it was that was there. And I haven't been back. I want to go back. I prefer to go back with someone else. But I want to go back and see if I feel anything there again and see what happens next time.
Yeah. And I would make sure that you're in a space of like real love.
Yeah.
Like feeling connected to source. Yeah. Calling source to be with you. And I went on a walk recently. I went on a hike. And I followed public footpaths all over, apart from when I got lost. I still get lost. But I followed public footpaths. And there was a chute being advertised nearby. We have chutes down here. And it was so close to the public footpath. I was starting to get really nervous, like somebody might miss or something. And so that could have been my panic. It could have been, I could have been picking up on something that was about to happen, all that. And I just asked Source to put this bubble of safety around me, either from my own panicked thoughts or from something that might have happened. And obviously it was fine. But I think, you know, you just need, we have to take care of ourselves and do what we think is okay. Yeah.
And I wish I had thought in the moment to call in Source, to call in the angels, to call in my spirit guides, to call in help. But I didn't. I just walked out of there as fast as I could because that's the best I could do. But it's like now upon reflection, I think I would deal with it differently if that happened to me again.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have all the information you needed in that moment, I guess. Yeah.
So you've talked a couple of times about getting lost. So I've gotten lost too, many times. What have you learned from getting lost when you're out in nature?
That I don't pay attention enough.
Yep.
And that might translate to how I live my life sometimes as well. I'm not present and grounded as much as I want to be. So a few things. So the first thing is like nature's always in charge. Like the paths are going to run out. They're not going to appear just because I need them to be. Weather systems change really quickly. I need to be like, she is going to do her own thing regardless of what I want. And that's been really important for me to take notice of. It's also taught me that I am more resourceful than I thought, that I'm okay with risks more than I thought, that I can find my way through when I don't think that I can. So 2 examples are coming to mind. One is I got lost not far from home, but it's on an old mining, like tin mines, and we have to be really careful because there's open mine shafts and people just, fall through. And most of them are fenced off. But if you veer off the public footpath, you need to be really careful because you don't know if it's just the ground's going to give way. And I'd got off the path right where, where Poldark is filmed. So it's where all the old tin mines are. And I just thought, this is not safe. And so I said to the ancients, just show me where I need to be because I can't figure this out. And I felt them, like my body physically moved. And I went and followed this particular path. And when I got around the top, I could see that if I'd have kept going, I would have got somewhere where I really didn't want to be. Like it could have got a bit dangerous. So knowing that I'm always guided, like really practical, they can call on me, I can call on them. And then the other time was I didn't prep well enough when I went out for a run, and I didn't. Sometimes my idea of time and distance can I just don't. Me and physical reality need to get to know each other still. But so I'd gone out on a run, but I hadn't timed the sunset properly, and so I'd misjudged when it was going to be dark. So thankfully I had a head torch, but I was 3 miles from my car when it was dark, and I'd never run a coastal path in the dark before. And I was like, it's safe, but I was scared and I was cold. It had got colder quicker than I thought. I'd got a coat with me. I got a running coat. So I was kind of all right, but my hands were starting to go numb. It was starting to rain. So I had my head torch on and I'm like, okay, so I have to watch where my feet are because I don't want to trip. And 2 things happened. First of all, I now know that green eyes floating in the middle of nowhere is not aliens. They're what happens to cows. Because I'm running and I could see these green eyes. I'm like, what the hell? And it was a herd of cows. And they had calves with them. Oh, God, my head. And I'm walking and I'm thinking, I really shouldn't eat cows. I feel like right now I shouldn't eat meat. I could say something. I don't mean you any harm. Because I had calves with them. I was right near the cliff edge, the path was. If they'd have startled, I did need to be careful. So I borrowed an old trick from a friend of mine and sang to them as I walked through. And that was fine. And that, like, my legs were going to give way. I was thinking, oh my God, the only way is through and I don't know what to do. So that was a good lesson in just, surviving going through stuff. But then when I got to the other end and I was starting to get cold and I knew I was only 1.5 miles away, but I'd already done about 8-10 miles. And at that time, that was quite a long run for me. And what I learned about myself was my inner critic was, oh my God, you're going to put people out if you have to call emergency, if you have to find somewhere, if you get lost, if you can't remember the way to get back, because I'd never run it in the dark.
Yeah.
So I knew the path really well, but I didn't know it in the dark.
Yeah.
And my inner critic was all about how my stupidity was going to cause other people problems.
Yeah.
And was a really, that's what I do in life. That's where my inner critic goes. So when you make mistakes or get things wrong, it's really helpful to see what your process is, because that will fractal out and you apply that to lots of different areas.
Yeah, that's exactly where I would go too, because, you always hear stories of people like doing something stupid and calling mounted rescue, and mounted rescue being like, if you're not injured, you need to get down on your own. Like, we can't come out just because, So there's definitely a part of me that has that fear of being the person that does something that makes a mistake or makes a bad decision and ends up doing something stupid. And then do I call for help? Do I not? And not wanting to put myself in that position. So, yeah. And that's nature, as you said. It's wild. You never know what's going to happen. You can miscalculate the sunset. Winds change. Rain happens. Hail happens. Snow might come unexpectedly. You never know what's going to happen. You can plan, but you also have to have like a contingency plan for if it gets too hot, if it gets too cold, and have like extra stuff. And it's part of connecting with nature, and part of getting in touch with that wildness is being prepared for all the different unexpected wildness that may occur.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I haven't done extreme sports.
Yeah,
I've
me
gone
neither.
coastal running,
Yeah.
but even that in that kind of like tamed, well, not extreme kind of sports, but
Mm.
even then it's like I don't make those mistakes anymore.
Yeah.
I still get lost, but I'm okay. I
Mm.
know I go out knowing that I'm probably going to get lost, and I know this area really well, so that's okay. And then just like there are going to be risks in life, you're
Mm.
going to be prepared, and speaking to other runners that run trails in, say, the US,
Mm.
on Facebook groups that I belong to, they go out knowing that they're probably going to come across a rattlesnake and things like
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
like stuff's going to happen and you never know.
Yeah.
And you can be as prepared as you want. But
Yeah, you've got to educate yourself about what's in your area.
mm,
Because I remember growing up in California as well and going back to visit my parents, going for a run and reminding myself, you need to look for the rattlesnakes because they would like to sun themselves out on the pavement, on the
yeah.
asphalt. And so, got to keep an eye out for those, which you don't have to worry
Mm.
about here. So it's
We get
just,
adders down here,
yeah.
that's about the
Yeah, I've
most.
never even seen one of those.
Mm,
Hmm.
mm. I don't
Yeah.
think they come out very often.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about learning what's in your area and learning what your particular flavor of nature in your area is like and what you need to look out for.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but also not being afraid of that because if you let yourself be afraid of those things, then you're never going to get out there and do it. Like you
Hmm.
you run by yourself. I do a
Hmm.
lot of walking by myself and I have women saying to me, how do you feel safe walking by yourself
Mm.
in southeast England? Like I don't feel like I have anything to be worried about. But a lot of
No,
people do.
and I suppose I'm lucky where
Mm.
I run and walk. It's such a safe area where
Mm.
I live, really. There is not much crime. So if I lived in a city like that would make me nervous. Like
Yeah.
that, I don't know that terrain. That's
Yeah.
not. Whereas I feel like, I don't know if this is arrogant, but I've always had this thing like, not like nature is mine. I don't mean it like that, but I have a
Mm.
right to be here. And when I was working quite intensely with some pagans, we would they would go up onto the moors, and you have to be careful when you light fires on the
Mm.
moors because there's peat, isn't there? So,
Yeah.
but I didn't know this at the time, but and if an ember goes, it can just go underground and it can cause a fire somewhere
Oh,
else.
wow.
I know. I had no idea. So I would not do me and
Yeah.
fire like you belong to somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, but there was somebody there who had worked with it for years, worked on the woods for years, worked on the land for years, like knew what they were doing. So we would go out and we would do circles, and they would like light fires, and then they would want to protect themselves from like farmers that come around that don't own the land, but they want to govern the land, kind of thing. And I remember, this is just coming to me, but it was the first time that I went onto the moors and they were casting a circle, and my friend went out with his wand, which was a lump of tree like this big. And this was years, like 11 years ago, and I was just like quite cynical about witchcraft and casting circles. And so he went to cast a circle out of time and space and took this massive wand, and I'm like, all right, that's a nice thing to do, that's a nice thing to do. And then saw this blue flame come off the top of, like, I could see it physically, but he didn't light it. It was just this blue flame, and I'm like, okay, there may be something to this. And I've later found out that that's called a witch's flame. I didn't
Oh.
know. A friend, when I told another friend of mine, she said, oh, you saw the witch's flame. And a farmer went past in his tractor and just never saw us, never, like, never encountered us or anything. I can't remember why I started telling that story now. It was something to do with about like knowing your terrain, or I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
I'm rambling.
No, and that's interesting because when you and I did some work in Avebury, the time that we
Mm-hmm.
went there, you did the same thing so that we wouldn't be bothered by other people that might be walking around the
Mm,
circle at night. And we
that's
weren't
it.
bothered.
So it's about like feeling an
Yes.
ownership, and I think that's what they taught me, was that so much of our land has been taken over by human beings and tamed and tarmacked and owned and claimed in this like real compartmentalized picket fences. And like in the UK, we're kind of like your castle and your boundaries, and nobody's going to come over, and this is mine, in that kind of ownership way.
However, much less so than in other countries like the United States, because at least we have public rights of way here. We have public footpaths, we have public right of ways. You don't have those in other countries.
Right.
So
right.
we do have, it's better here than it is in some other parts. But yes, I absolutely know what you mean.
Yeah. And I guess what they were teaching me is like, it's not about ownership, but I have got a right to a relationship.
Yes.
And so, you know, I know one of the things that you said to me about, I remember casting a circle in the middle of a roundabout in Avebury.
Yeah.
And really didn't care what anybody thought, because it was between me and the spirit and me and the spirit of the land. And that tops anything, unless it's like people's safety, you know, but that tops whether I'm going to look daft or anything. So it's put me in right relationship with nature, which is a deep, respectful place.
It is, and I still haven't reached that. So when I connect with the stones at Avebury, or when I go into West Kennet Longbow and meditate, I still feel like the crazy woman doing weird stuff with the stones. I still haven't gotten past that point. And it's like sometimes I'll be kind of standing next to a stone and I can hear people saying things about me like I'm deaf. Something like, you know, oh, she's connecting with the stones, or, you know.
They do actually say that.
I have heard. This one time I was sitting on one of the stones has like a little kind of hollow where you can kind of sit in, and I was sitting there with my eyes closed, and I could hear these two men walking, and one of them said something like, oh, she's communing with the stones, or something like that. And I just thought, okay.
So my response to that would be like, I know, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Like, you're missing out.
Exactly.
Like, you are missing out on something so incredible and amazing. I mean, the experiences that Stone Circles have given me, I wouldn't swap that for a ticket at the cinema, or... Oh, it's just incredible. So I suppose mine is like, you're missing out. I'm not the crazy lady. Like, this is one of the most sane things ever. Yeah. You're missing out.
And you're really good at reframing that kind of stuff. So like all of my insecurities, I feel like you have an answer for those. So since you've brought up stone circles, you've got a lot of stone circles in your area where you are. So how has working with stone circles helped you rewild or untame or connect with nature and spirit?
It's helped me trust my instincts. So when I first moved here, there was a pagan man who introduced me to the stone circles, and this one, we parked up, and you kind of have to walk to get to it, and I just ran because I could feel it, and I didn't know why. I just could feel it, and then I just like questioned myself and turned around to me and he went, you know where you're going, just trust your instincts and follow it. And I did, and I found it. Yeah. And that, like, so now I know what that feeling's like, how it feels in my body, what the sensations are like. So you can transfer that then over into your life, you know, trusting your instincts. For me, I have to feel it in my body to know what does it mean to trust your instincts? How do you know whether you're just in your ego, or if you're in your instincts, or if you're in your trauma, or things like that? So it's helped with that. So that was like 7 years ago. And then when I've had challenges in my life, like I've got in the car and you know when you're just like on autopilot driving, and something was happening in my life and it had just not thrown me for a curveball, and I was just trying to stay in my body. My anxiety was wanting me to go out of my body, and just driving like on autopilot. Then I pulled up somewhere and I looked around and I thought, oh my God, I'm at the stone circle. And like my body had taken me, you know, my body had taken me, and I just went in and I just laid down and I fell asleep for about an hour in it, and kind of like got replenished. And then this weird things happened. I've been working with a local stone circle, and I had never experienced this before, but it called me before I went to sleep. And I've done, I think, some interesting things happened to me, but I was like, really, Cara? Really? You're getting a call from a stone circle? Like, SOS! And it was like, we want activating. We need activating. And so when I went down to the stone circle, I got in touch with some other people who, because I was kind of like, why would a stone circle need activating? It doesn't need human beings.
It's been abandoned.
It said we've been used as a tourist attraction, and we're not being used. We're not being used. And so I've been in there and worked with the energies and then just felt incredible bliss, incredible bliss, got connected with, like, the best I can say is, I think, the energies of the earth and the template, not energetic template, but whatever it is that is going on at that level. I felt like the stone circle was connected with my energies and then connected with the earth energies, and just like this replenishment kind of happened as well, or this reconnected. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm not sure I've answered your question there.
No, I think you have, because I think if people have visited a stone circle before, they've done it the tourist way, probably.
Yeah.
They haven't, most people haven't connected with it in the way that you have. And I think that's a very different relationship. So talking about relationship with nature, that's a very different relationship with a stone circle.
Yeah.
It's working with it or connecting with it or using it for energy purposes rather than just tourist purposes.
Yeah, and portals.
Yeah.
Like portals of information, or like helping it connect with, there's all sorts of theories about pyramids and their alignment, and I don't profess to understand all of that and know how it works, but I know how to trust my instincts and follow guidance on how to maybe hook up a portal like that to these energetics. And they all feel different. Like a lot of the stone circles down here are very, there's granite, there's earth. People come down here and you have to sort your shit out because the ground doesn't let you off. It's like really anchoring. Yet you go to Avebury and it's like stars. It's obviously a portal for different kinds of communication. It's not from the earth. It's from star beings. And so, like, I suppose in my work as a channel, I see part of my role as listening to guidance like that and acting on it and serving in that way, serving the earth by helping her with these portals, with these sacred things, sacred points on the earth that people who are more knowledgeable than us have obviously done something in the past.
So you talk about portals. For people who might not know what that is, we've all heard of portals, but probably in the context of science fiction. What are portals in our reality?
I knew I shouldn't use that word.
But it's a word that people come across. I mean, there's one of the trees in my book. I was told that it was a portal. It confirmed it was a portal. It said, someday you will experience this aspect of me. You're not ready yet.
Okay.
So I don't even know what to expect. It's like, what is this? A portal to other dimensions, a portal to other like realities, a portal to other energies, systems, thought forms, all of that.
Yeah. I have got friends that could answer this a lot better than I can. But I suppose for me, it is about portals to dimensions. And that sounds really lofty. And I guess they just help connect into a spiritual dimension, if you like. So maybe some stone circles are helping you connect more with the Fey energy or tree sprites and work at that level, which is what I think these are about. I certainly encountered them down here. Whereas Avebury stone circles help you connect into the dimension of the stars and aliens and other beings from dimensions that are not of this earth. And that's how I see portals. It's a focus of energy.
Okay.
So I did this solo casting of a circle on Bodmin Moors in fog in the middle of the night.
Beautiful.
It was one of the most powerful and scariest things I've done. So I was working with the goddess Lilith at the time, and she asked me to cast a circle, which was, I won't go into the details, but it's different from how you would normally do it. And I was stood in the middle of two circles. So if you think of like a Venn diagram, where they overcross, I was working in the overcross. And I didn't know why, but I trusted this guidance. And some not very helpful pagan friends of mine at the time, like a sea witch, was just like, how dare you do something that is different? Who do you think you are? And you're breaking rules. And I'm like, okay. But I did it anyway. And it was fog and I couldn't see the hand in front of my face. My friend was working somewhere else in the stone. She's like, I'm not getting involved in what you're doing, but you follow your own guidance and you trust what you're doing. And I called on all of my ancestors and the beings that had been there before me, and followed this guidance that I believe I'd got from Lilith. And I saw just hundreds and thousands of women join me, like with my eyes closed. And it felt like this magical, I think we would call it sisterhood, but it just felt like reclaiming feminine ways of working with the land and the magic and the real, like, shamanic, I guess, power. And then felt this incredibly strong energy move through me. And the words, "how dare you," came up. Then afterwards, there was this sea witch friend of mine said, "Look what you've done." And when we looked back, there was like fire light.
Wow.
Like, it was light on it. Not that he said, "Well, I don't know what's going to happen to you now." Or this, he was a bit of a doom and gloomer. Like, nothing happened.
A bit dramatic.
Yeah, I was fine. But I feel like some people are, and maybe it's women, I don't know, but I think some of us are called to work with the energies of the land to help heal from all the stuff. And I remember just before we went to Avebury reading a channeled piece by Lazarus. Can you remember I shared it with you?
Yeah.
About how sacred stone circles are, but they have been used for non-beneficial things. They've been used for awful things. And some of that energy does need cleaning up. You know, it does need healing. The land needs help to heal. And I think that is part of what some of us are called to do as well. I think that's definitely what I'm called to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a very different way of working or going out into nature, or going out to student circles that a lot of people haven't experienced. So I think just hearing your stories will help people, kind of give people an idea of other ways that they can connect.
Yeah. So and a real, like, straightforward way of doing, you don't even need to know how to cast a circle. If you do want to know how to cast a circle, I looked it up on the internet and put my own. I had some guidance from my pagan friends as well. But you go up to a stone circle. I always ask the energy of the circle and the ancestors for permission to join and to go into the circle. And then I always just call in the ancestors, like, and sit with them and be with them and say to the circle, like, "Is there anything you need from me? Can I support you? What do you want me to know? Or would you like me to do anything?" And I know, you know, some of it might be, can you pick up the litter? Do you know?
I got, that was one of the messages from one of my trees.
Yeah. And the appreciation is really powerful as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something, perhaps that's kind of the next phase of my work with nature. The next stage for me is going out to nature and just asking, what do you need from me? How can I help? Yeah. Because my whole focus last year was trees. You've asked me to share your stories. What's your story? So I think now it's more connecting with the land and saying, like, what can I do for you?
Yeah. And nature is, like, slow. So when you channel information from rocks, it's a very different experience from channeling information from, like, guides or something. You know, it's like nature is, compared to us, it's slow, and you do have to slow down to be with it. And it's so gentle and powerful. And flowers call to me for a short period of time, but I struggle to hear flowers.
Okay.
Yeah, they are a different realm. I struggle to hear.
That's interesting. What about elementals? Because I have wanted to connect more with the Fae. I've wanted to connect more with that whole realm. Haven't yet dedicated myself to doing so or put the effort into doing so. So I'd love to hear some of your stories about what it's been like for you connecting with that type of energy and life form.
So I guess that started when I went to a tree workshop, and it was, the guy that was leading it was helping us, like, just focus on a tree and, like, listening to it. And that's when I discovered that weeping willow is probably my tree, and could see how, he said, this would be interesting to see if anybody has had this experience, but he said there will be a tree that you've been drawn to since you were little. And mine was weeping willow. Like, wherever I went, that's what I was always drawn to. And then they all have a particular meaning. I think you'll know more about than me. But I remember on this day, like, just feeling into the tree, and I could feel myself disappear. I thought I was going to fall over. I'd not experienced that before. That kind of blew my mind. And then, like, I have seen Fae, I feel Fae, and I've had messages from Fae, but I think they choose it. That has certainly not been anything that's beyond me. Like some other people might be able to call them consciously. That's not my experience of the Fae. They just turn up when they want to, and they've given me messages, and it's very apparent when they're there. It's like the energy of the trees or the flowers or whatever it is, in whatever way they're trying to communicate, just shine. Like they're literally brighter, and there's movement, and they come alive. That's kind of how I know they're talking to me, but that's not something that I have consciously cultivated.
Yeah, because I've many times being out in nature, I've kind of spoken to them or set the intention or said, I would love to connect more with you. Silence. So I feel like either I'm not ready yet or I don't know. But
it'd be interesting to see if anybody who's listening knows more about it than we do.
Yeah.
Because I know for me, definitely, that period of time when I worked intensely with the moon, and I would go to be called to pagan things, I would get invited to pagan sabbats. And I would just think, I really feel like baking bread. And then I would turn up and they would say, that's what we offer during this. So it felt like a kind of coming home to me. It wasn't planned.
Yeah.
I found those people after saying to Source, I'm ready for my soul group of friends. But I think I've been really lucky because I'm just so arrogant sometimes. Like, I remember my friend introducing me to the idea of tree sprites, I think they're called. So they are very specific energies that work with the tree and keep them healthy and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember thinking, yeah, whatever. And then driving home and slamming my brakes on because I saw this ugly little thing like a gnome hugging a tree, like physically with my eyes. Wow. And I was like, what? Went back, and obviously there was nothing there. And I remember saying to my friend, it was this really ugly thing, and it's got far more important things to do than being concerned about what it looks like.
Yeah.
But it's like, I was cynical, I dismissed it, and then it's there right in front of my eyes. Yeah, I think they just were like, actually, you don't know everything. We're going to prove to you that we're here. Yeah. So maybe if you go around going, I don't believe in you.
I'll give that a try. Probably get knocked on my bum.
I know.
They'll trip me as I'm walking through the forest. Here we are.
Well, isn't that like another learning as well? When you work with those kind of energies, it's just like we humans think we've conquered the earth or the earth is ours to do. And really, no. You're going to get brought back down to earth with a bump. There are other beings here that know a lot more than I do. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So what would be your recommendation for someone who wants to get started on this rewilding journey or untaming or connecting with nature? Like, where would you suggest someone start?
What comes to me when you say that is find something as wild as you can wherever you are. Don't think you have to go to the moors or anything, but spend time in nature, a bit outside your comfort zone, but not too much. Not too much so that it's terrifying and overwhelming. I never used to be able to walk through a herd of cows. I just was so scared my legs would buckle. And I'm like, no. And my partner who I was with at the time was so used to it, just couldn't. And I felt like such an idiot. Oh, it's too much. I'm too scared. And back off, because there's no enjoyment in that. And you've got to be in a relaxed space. So I would encourage people to get out in as wild the places as possible and look at nature and with an eye of curiosity. So you could even do this with plants in your own house if you can't get out in wild nature. And just, what is it that I am seeing? What is it that I am sensing? What is it that I am feeling? And that your feelings are the way in. What am I feeling here? Where's my curiosity taking me? And then slow down as much as you can. And sometimes, like if you relax your eyes a bit, you might start seeing the auric field around as well. You can do that. It just shifts a bit. I think in terms of tuning into nature, it would be feelings. And I tell you a really powerful thing that happened to me when I was learning how to turn my empath skills on and off instead of just being on all the time. One of the techniques is to go out. I learned this from somebody, it wasn't mine, to go out in nature and just name things with no judgment, not like, oh, that's lovely, or that's nice. It's just like, that's a tree, that's a that's a bush, that's a flower, that's a bee, literally, that's a lamppost, literally like that. And it helps you be really present. Because when we judge something, we're in our minds and it takes us away from now. So even just doing that, if you did that for just a few minutes every day for a while, that would be interesting to see what happened. What about you? What would you suggest?
Well, the trees. The whole book is full of ideas from the trees. But one of the things was making more contact with the trees and kind of treating them more as we would treat people. So as you're walking through the woods, touch a tree, make physical contact with it, speak to them, even if it's just, hi, oak, hi, holly, whatever. But kind of acknowledging them as living beings whenever you go out into nature. So not just treating them like landscape or scenery.
Yes.
They're alive, like acknowledge them, touch them. They said that they like it when we touch them. They like being touched. They like that kind of physical contact with us.
Oh, that's so gorgeous.
I know.
Yeah.
So just, treating them kind of the same ways we would a person.
So respect.
Yeah.
Respect and knowing that they are alive.
Yeah. They said, obviously, if you're walking through the forest, we don't expect you to say hello to every single tree. But, like, if you're walking right past a tree, just say, hey, touch it.
I'm just imagining, like, there must be people listening that have got so many different ways that they do it as well, or so many different experiences. It would be really good to hear from people about their experiences or questions around anything like this.
Oh. Good. So, any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, it's just, I feel really so happy talking about this. And that was one of the things I was going to mention. Okay, so that's what the happiness is about. One of the things that is so lovely about nature, if you can be present, and I wish I had come up with this, but it wasn't me. Nature never asks anything of you. So you don't walk through nature and it's like, you're too fat, you should have done your hair differently, oh my God, have you not got a better job, look at this, your bank balance, all that that's shite that we have in our society. When you go into nature, you can lose all of that. And I guess that's part of the untaming, but lose any of that sense of having to be anything other than you are. And also the parallel to that is you don't try and improve nature. You don't look at a tree and think, you'd be so much better if your branch just went a little bit down there, or if we could just trim a bit off your trunk. You've got a few too many petals going on there. We need to get you on one. Yeah. Let's get you a makeover.
Yeah.
There's none of that. And I think without you even knowing it, the more you immerse yourself in it, the more easier it is to just be in the joy of the moment and to just be present to what is wonderful and beautiful and not feel like you have to improve yourself or life or what you're surrounded by. I think the joy of the nature is it's acceptance, it's just gorgeous.
And I almost feel like nature, when we connect with nature, nature's connecting with our soul, with our higher self, not necessarily with who we are in this incarnation or physical reality. That just popped into my head. What do you think?
Say a bit more about that.
So when we connect with nature, we're connecting with the core of ourselves, the deepest inner sense of who we are, not just in this lifetime, but throughout all the dimensions and realities and lifetimes, and like the core of us, our higher self, I don't know. Again, I think literally popped into my head and came out of my mouth, but
it took, so the language we quite often use is nature touches our soul and it brings us alive from that soul level. And I think you've just articulated what I was trying to describe, really, in that, it's not a personality thing. It's not a connection at the level of personality. It goes deeper than that, and it goes to a place of oneness. And if you're really, really lucky, you get to experience the oneness in all the different dimensions like we've just been talking about. And if you're really, really lucky, you really get to feel the oneness of everything, that we are all one. And that goes back to that seagull moment that I kind of mentioned. So I think, you just wrapped that up beautifully there.
You did, but based on something.
We did.
We wrapped it up.
We did a good team job.
I think that's absolutely it. We are one with nature. But yet, in our daily lives, we don't feel that way usually. We feel very much disconnected, especially if we live in a town or
Yeah.
So it's like getting back to that oneness with Mother Nature and our planet and everything that exists.
And it's beautiful, it's abundant, it's never ending. And I think it can just like, I'm filling up because I think we can be reminded of that and then get filled up and go back into life.
And take that with us.
Yeah.
Yay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
This
you.
has been a lovely conversation. I hope the people enjoy because I just had a blast.
If we enjoyed it, I'm sure someone else will. At least one person. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you again for listening. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com or find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and get in touch. I would love to give you a shout out on the show, and I would love to hear your input. Also, what would you like Cara and I to discuss on our next episode together? That would be great to know too. I'm sure we won't have problems coming up with a topic on our own, but as you know, my favorite topics are the ones that you send me. So again, thank you so much for listening. Next week's episode will probably be a solo episode, but I'm not quite sure at this point. So I will let you know next week when you tune in. Thank you so much for listening, and to remember to visit hollywharton.com/302 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.